You're watching at France 24. I'm Markus Karlsson, and today we're bringing you special coverage from the World Economic Forum, which is underway right here in Davos in Switzerland. And today I have the pleasure as well to welcome Ben Verweyden. He is the Chief Executive of Alcatel-Lucent, the network equipment maker, and also a board member of the World Economic Forum itself. So he's a well-connected guy. Welcome to the business interview.
Thank you for having me.
Now, what are you taking away from the World Economic Forum and its annual meeting this year? What do you think is the main message that we should take from this?
So let me give you the good and the bad. The good is an enormous amount of young people, young entrepreneurs, young global shapers who have been very vocal in their view and in their message to the world leaders. And that was refreshing, helpful, because it's a very different perspective. The bad for me was that the idea of global agreements on trade, on sustainability, apparently has lost track. And that we were prepared here by a lot of political leaders who talked about reducing that expectation and doing more regionally, doing more bilateral, which I think is a pity.
Now, the eurozone crisis, it's been hovering over this event like a dark cloud this year. There's a lot of chatter about what would happen if the eurozone debt crisis deteriorates further. What's your sense of that?
I think, to be honest, that was the beginning. It's certainly not the end of Davos, because speculation about what would happen was dampened, and I think that was a good thing, because most of the political leaders were very clear that that is not on the agenda. So while we may have different opinions about what that means, certainly I don't think that at the end of Davos the issue was so much but what will happen if the euro falls apart, because the assurances were it won't fall apart. So the question was more how we get through it and what is the cost of the time that it takes to get through it.
And what is that cost in your view and in the view of your fellow chief executives?
Well, there are two main costs. The first cost is to society. It's in jobs, it's in wealth creation, it is in certainty. And the other is much more from looking from the outside in, is a loss of confidence. So there is all incentive to get on with life and do what's necessary. And in my view, the recipe cannot be just more Europe, it has to be better Europe.
Now, as I said before, you're a board member of the World Economic Forum itself. Talk us through the utility of this kind of event, to have business leaders and politicians all in one place for 5 days in 1 year.
Yeah, and I've heard a lot about, you know, the elite coming together. And for sure, it is, in a way, it is a special group. But it's a very diverse group. And I think what Klaus Schwab has built here, which makes it absolutely unique, and people travel to actually a remote place, you know, it takes you 2 hours from Zurich to get here, is the unique mix of people of different origin, different backgrounds. You have religious leaders, you have NGOs, you have academics, you have government, you have business. It all comes together. And this is one of the few places I know on earth where people debate an issue from those mix of backgrounds.
But it's not so much about deal making.
No. This is also not to conclude. So it's not that there's a secret, you know, declaration at the end where people go home and say, oh, let me look what happens this year in Davos and this is what I have to do. That's not there. You hope that people come back inspired, having new ideas and concepts, have made bridges that were maybe difficult to get to in the real world.
Now, the theme this year, it's the great transformation, shaping new models. There's been some criticism that that's subject is a little bit wishy-washy, but the argument basically is here that capitalism as it currently stands doesn't work for the 21st century. Do you agree with that, first of all?
I totally disagree with that. Capitalism as a philosophy, if people don't have it, they aspire to get there. I travel around the world, I've never seen more people lifted out of poverty because of capitalism. It's not the philosophy, it's how we implement it. We have to deal with certain issues. Inequality is less acceptable today than it was yesterday. Fine, we deal with that. If you look to transparency, it is more important in a 24/7 information society than ever before. But if you look to entrepreneurial behavior, capabilities to start your own models, it has been never more liberated than it is today. We in the West, we feel the pressure. But if you live in Brazil or you live in India, you will say, we never had it the good.
Mm-hmm. But surely, as you were saying, it's not working for some. For instance, we see people here in Davos from the Occupy movement. They've been building igloos around Davos to protest against the way that capitalism works.
There have always been protests. I'm old enough to remember the 60s. There were violent protests. The fact that there's protest is a good thing. It's what democracy is. The mixed is that, you know, institutional greed is what they probably label it. Well, if we have problems with institutional greed, we should fix that. That doesn't mean that the free enterprise, the choices that people have, the fact that you can express yourself in every way, economically and socially, is a bad thing. It's a good thing. And if you want to get rid of certain elements, fine, we have legislation and regulation to go after it.
So basically what you're saying is we don't need to reform capitalism, but perhaps we need to tinker a little bit with it.
We need to reform, but we need not just reform the business.
But what exactly do you mean then when you say reform?
We also need to reform the way we make decisions. What I mean with reform is make sure that you implement a license to be there. And a license to be there means that you communicate with your employees, your suppliers, your customers, and the society in which you operate. They must welcome you. And that is today, with all the transparency and all the communication that we have, more true than ever before. If you organize that, you can have much more flexibility. So one of the things that people do in policy-making positions, if times are tough, they have more rules and they want to limit, they want to secure what is there. This is not about job security, this is about job creation. Because if it's just security, only those who are already in a job will benefit. This is about creating jobs, creating new opportunities. So you may want to end up with more flexibility in a reformed environment.
Now, what about your sector and the way that your company is doing it at the moment? You've had to announce job cuts in France, your home market, just the other day.
What we announced was there are certain jobs that where the technology moved on and where the knowledge base that there was have to fluctuate into new. So we're offering a lot of tools to go from job to job. It's not the same. But in the structure that we live in, it's been seen as either you are in what you do today and you stay there forever, or it's been seen as a bad thing. The good thing is create mobility, create the security of people by what they know, what they can do, to move from jobs to jobs. That's what we try to do.
So basically encourage innovation.
It's innovation, it's an education, permanent education. It's the capability to make people, I would say, more secure in themselves.
And how do you achieve that sense of empowerment among people? How do you provide that environment where people can innovate? For instance, here in Europe, there's lots of talk about that. There's talk of how Europeans at this stage seem unable to innovate.
We have a problem, and let me tell you what I think the problem is. Politicians in and by themselves cannot solve this crisis. Business people in and by themselves cannot solve this crisis. And for whatever reason, we seem to have a very hard time to have a real dialogue. Sure, we have declarations of encouragement and intent and rules, but we do not have a real dialogue. If you want to innovate, if you want to create new jobs, you need three things. You need to have the confidence of people that taking a risk is a good thing. So you need encouragement. We need to say to young people, we love your ideas. They're different, we'll give you the space to go and do it. The second thing is, you need to make sure that you have a risk financial environment, meaning you need to reward risk. And the third element, what you need to do, is you need to say to the big companies, work with the small ones. Now, maybe on the third element we do a reasonable job, but it can be better. But we do a lousy job in the first two. And I think we need to bring the two pillars of the economy, of society together in a different way than we've done so far.
But you see, you say that we need to take more risks.
Yeah.
A lot of people say that excessive risk-taking is what got us into the eurozone crisis and the financial crisis.
No, that is speculation with tools, financial tools. That's not what I mean. I take risk with people. If you have a product that is different but not yet proven, why wouldn't we give you the chance to come out and do it? Why do we have the Googles and the Facebooks in Silicon Valley? And why don't we have them in Europe? We don't have them enough. Do you think that people have less idea here? No. Do we have less talent? Absolutely not. We should give them the platform. And we should not copy what they have in Silicon Valley. We should be proud of our cultural differences, but we should understand that you want to encourage people to make those next steps.
But you said here in Davos that you're scared that Europe is slipping behind Asia when it comes to innovation. What did you mean by that?
Well, if I simply look to what people use, and as a consumer they have a free choice, what they use as tools, what they use as how they invest in their own lives, the percentage of products and services generated from Europe is going down. If I look to unemployment figures around the world, the percentage of the West is going up. If I look to the new startups, we're lagging behind. So it's not difficult to forecast that if these trends continue, we will have another problem. Because I think our problem is not the euro. They will fix the euro one way or the other. Our problem is our lack of growth.
All right, with that, we're going to have to wrap it up there. Ben Verweijen of Alcatel-Lucent, thanks very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us.
Thank you very much.
And with that, we're going to wrap up the program as well. Thanks for watching France 24.